In the blistering heat of the Arizona Territory, where the sun scorched the earth like an unrelenting forge and the wind whispered secrets through the canyons, old rancher Elijah Hawthorne gripped the reins of his weary horse, his calloused hands trembling not from age, but from the ghosts that rode beside him. For 20 years, he had buried his past deeper than the roots of the mesquite trees, but on that fateful afternoon in 1887, as thunderheads gathered like omens on the horizon, a lone rider appeared at the edge of his sprawling ranch, a woman, cloaked in dust and determination, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Take the cloth off," she asked, pointing to the faded red rag draped over the weathered signpost at the ranch's gate, a sign he had covered long ago to hide the name that haunted him. With a hesitant nod, Elijah reached out and yanked it away, revealing the carved words, Hawthorne Haven, and in that instant, the horror of what he had lost flooded back, freezing him in place as memories clawed their way to the surface, threatening to shatter the fragile walls he had built around his broken heart. If you believe in the power of kindness and the hope of second chances, hit that like button, drop a comment sharing your own story of redemption, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late, and subscribe to Moments of Love for more tales that touch the soul. Elijah had come to this land as a young man full of dreams, his bride Amelia by his side, her laughter like the babble of a mountain stream amid the arid wilderness. They had carved out Hawthorne Haven from nothing but sweat and sheer will, building a modest cabin, corrals for the cattle, and a garden where Amelia planted wildflowers that bloomed defiantly against the odds. Their son, little Samuel, arrived like a blessing in the spring of '67, his tiny cries echoing through the valleys as if announcing a new era of prosperity. But the Wild West was a cruel mistress, unforgiving to those who dared to tame her. Raids from outlaws, droughts that turned the soil to powder, and the constant shadow of violence tested them at every turn. Elijah worked from dawn till dusk, his back bending under the weight of responsibility, while Amelia held the home together with quiet strength, her hands mending fences and hearts alike. Yet, beneath the surface, cracks began to form. Elijah's temper flared in the heat of exhaustion, arguments sparked over trivial matters, and the isolation gnawed at their spirits like coyotes at a fresh kill. The first real challenge struck like lightning from a clear sky, a brutal winter storm in '72 that wiped out half their herd, leaving them teetering on the brink of ruin. Elijah rode into town, desperate for a loan, but the bankers laughed at his pleas, calling him a fool for staking his life on such unforgiving land. He returned home defeated, his pride shattered, and in his despair, he turned to the bottle, the whiskey burning away the edges of his pain but fueling a darkness that grew within him. Amelia begged him to stop, her eyes filled with a sorrow that cut deeper than any blade, but Elijah pushed her away, convinced that his struggles were his alone to bear. Samuel, now a boy of 5, watched from the shadows, his innocent world fracturing as he saw his father's strength crumble into anger. The ranch, once a haven, became a prison of unspoken resentments, where every creak of the floorboards echoed with the weight of what was left unsaid. As the years dragged on, the challenges mounted like storm clouds piling higher. A band of rustlers hit the ranch one moonless night, driving off the remaining cattle and leaving behind a trail of blood. Elijah's faithful ranch hand, Old Tom, gunned down in the chaos. The loss ignited a fury in Elijah that he could no longer contain. He rode out alone in pursuit, his revolver heavy at his hip, vowing vengeance in the name of justice. But the Wild West blurred the lines between right and wrong, and in a dusty showdown under a merciless sun, Elijah fired the shot that ended the rustlers' leader, a man who, in his dying breath, revealed he was no outlaw, but a desperate father driven to theft by the same hardships that plagued them all. The horror of that realization settled over Elijah like a shroud, but he buried it deep, returning to the ranch with blood on his hands and silence in his soul. Amelia saw the change in him, the way his eyes avoided hers, the way he lingered in the barn long after dark, staring at the cloth he had draped over the old family portrait hanging on the wall, a portrait of the three of them, smiling in better days. The turning point came during the Great Fever outbreak of '75, when illness swept through the territory like a wildfire, claiming lives without mercy. Samuel fell ill first, his small body racked with shivers, his cheeks flushed with heat that no cool cloth could soothe. Amelia nursed him day and night, her own strength waning as she poured every ounce of love into saving their boy. Elijah, haunted by his past sins, rode for the doctor in town, but the trails were flooded from relentless rains, and by the time he returned, Samuel's light had faded, his tiny hand limp in Amelia's grasp. The grief was a chasm that swallowed them whole. Elijah blamed himself, convinced his absence had sealed their son's fate, while Amelia withdrew into a shell of quiet mourning, her once vibrant spirit dimmed. In the months that followed, their marriage frayed like an old rope, arguments escalating into screams that echoed across the empty plains. One stormy night, in a fit of rage born from unbearable pain, Elijah struck out, not with his fist, but with words sharper than spurs, accusing Amelia of weakness, of failing their son. She left the next dawn, mounting her horse with tears streaming down her face, riding into the unknown without a backward glance, leaving Elijah alone with the ranch and the ghosts. For years, Elijah wandered the halls of his empty home like a specter, the ranch falling into disrepair as he neglected the land that had once been his pride. He covered mirrors with cloths to avoid seeing the hollow man he had become, draped rags over doorways where memories lingered, and shrouded the old signpost at the gate, erasing the name, Hawthorne Haven, as if to erase the life he had lost. The townsfolk whispered of the cursed rancher, a man who spoke to no one, who chased away drifters with a shotgun and a glare. His days blurred into a monotonous grind of survival, tending the few remaining cattle, mending fences that always seemed to break, and staring at the horizon, half hoping, half dreading that Amelia might return. The isolation deepened his wounds, turning regret into a constant companion, and in quiet moments, he would sit by Samuel's grave behind the cabin, the wind carrying his unspoken apologies to the stars. But change, like a distant rider, was approaching, though Elijah could not yet see it. It began with the arrival of Clara, the mysterious woman who appeared at his gate that dusty afternoon. She was no ordinary traveler. Her dress was worn but clean, her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen the world's cruelties and emerged unbroken. She claimed to be seeking work, a hand to help with the chores, but there was something familiar in her gaze that unsettled Elijah from the start. He hired her reluctantly, her quiet efficiency breathing faint life back into the ranch, mending the garden, rounding up stray calves, and cooking meals that filled the air with forgotten warmth. As weeks turned to months, Clara's presence chipped away at Elijah's barriers. She shared stories of her own hardships, of a childhood marked by loss, of wandering the West in search of something she couldn't name. Elijah found himself opening up, bit by bit, recounting tales of Amelia and Samuel in hushed tones, the words tasting like ash but lifting a weight he hadn't realized he carried. Suspense built slowly, like the gathering of a storm, as Clara's questions grew more pointed. She noticed the cloths draped everywhere, the one over the portrait in the barn, the shroud on Samuel's grave marker, the rag on the signpost, and gently probed their meaning. Elijah resisted at first, his voice gruff with warning, but her kindness wore him down, reminding him of Amelia's gentle persistence. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of fire, Clara stood by the gate, her hand on the covered sign. "Take the cloth off," she asked again, her voice soft but insistent. With a deep breath, Elijah complied, revealing the name that symbolized all he had built and lost. But that was only the beginning. Encouraged by her, he uncovered the portrait next, staring into the eyes of his younger self, Amelia's smile piercing his heart like an arrow. Tears welled as memories flooded back, not just the pain, but the joy, the love that had once defined him. The true horror unfolded in the barn, under the flickering light of a lantern, when Clara led him to the old chest he had hidden away, covered in a dusty cloth for decades. "Take this one off too," she urged, her own hands trembling now. Elijah hesitated, his mind racing with dread, for he knew what lay inside. Letters from Amelia, written in the feverish days before she left, confessing her own secrets, a miscarriage she had hidden, her fear that she had failed him as much as he had her. But there was more, a locket with a lock of Samuel's hair, and a faded photograph of a baby girl, born in secret after Amelia's departure, given up to protect her from the ranch's curse. As Elijah lifted the cloth and opened the chest, the truth hit him like a thunderclap. Clara was that daughter, come back to find her father, her resemblance to Amelia now undeniable in the lantern's glow. He stood in horror, not at her, but at the years wasted in self-imposed exile, the love he had denied himself, the family he could have reclaimed. In that moment of revelation, the rancher's world shattered and reformed. Horror gave way to sobs that racked his frame, Clara's arms around him bridging the chasm of time. She had searched for him across the West, piecing together stories from travelers and old letters, driven by a need to heal the wounds that bound them. Together, they began the slow work of rebuilding, not just the ranch, but their fractured lives. Elijah learned to forgive himself, tending the garden with Clara's help, watching wildflowers bloom anew. The signpost stood uncovered, a beacon of hope, and as seasons turned, Hawthorne Haven echoed once more with laughter, a testament to resilience and the enduring power of love. As the sun sets on this tale of loss and redemption, if this story has touched your heart, stirred emotions you didn't expect, or reminded you of the fragility and beauty of human connections, please like, comment below with how it moved you, share it with a loved one, and subscribe to Moments of Love for more stories that celebrate the human spirit. And before we end, a special request: comment your favorite line from this story. It could be the one that made you tear up or the one that gave you hope.